Again, everybody, welcome. As you're joining, we've got a few more attendees joining here. We'll get started here in about 1 minute. About 3 minutes after the hour, we'll get going and get our webinar and the roundtable discussion kicked off. Thanks so much. Just got a few more seconds here and we'll get things going. Okay, we're at 3 minutes after the hour, so let's get things going. Let's jump into it. So let me first say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for everyone who's joining us internationally. Got a great group of attendees, great group of panelists to discuss what we believe is a very important topic at AllCloud and at AWS. First, to do a quick introduction of myself. My name is Eric Crump. I'm the Senior Vice President of our North American Business Unit for AWS. I'll be your host today, and we've got a great group of panelists with us to discuss our topic today around cloud disaster recovery. This is a very important topic to us because we are in discussions with our clients and partners quite a bit about disaster recovery. You know, in the times that we're living in today, business continuity is a very important topic. It's coming up quite a bit. Companies are looking at it and reevaluate it, and CloudVR is a big component of that to make sure that if workloads or systems are compromised, that they can be recovered quickly and that business operations are returned to normal as soon as possible. So great topic, great panelists, great group of attendees. Just a couple of logistical items. Today, as we go through the panel discussion, please, at the right, there's a chat feature for you. We really would like you to submit questions. We'll handle as many of those at the end. And then throughout, to make it as interactive as we can, we'll have a couple of polling questions. And please answer those as you feel comfortable. If you don't, we understand. Just want to try to get a feel and poll on a few items, from the group of people and attendees we have today. So, without further ado, let me kind of jump in. I have the pleasure as the host to introduce our panelists today. Let me first start out with Garrett Pollard. He is one of AWS's disaster recovery specialists. Let me turn it over to Garrett to introduce himself.
Hey everybody, it's a pleasure speaking to you all today. And as Eric mentioned, I am the Cloud and Door DR specialist here at AWS. Been in the backup disaster recovery space for over 8 years at this point, and really looking forward to this discussion today. So the content's going to be something you'll find very, very helpful.
Great, Garrett. Thanks so much. And then Justin Mungall, I'd like to introduce. I know Justin well. We work very closely together. Justin is one of our lead engineers and solution architects for AllCloud North America. Justin.
Hey everyone. So as Eric mentioned, my name is Justin Mungall. I'm an AWS solution architect here at AllCloud. I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia. Very excited to be speaking with you all today. My background experience is quite broad. I've been in the IT space for about 20 years. I've spent a lot of time in the IT trenches before working as a solution architect. I've worked in systems and network administration, database administration, and I've done some development work as well. As far as DR goes, I've been through DR solution designs, implementations, tests, and failovers. One of the things I really enjoy doing now is talking to customers about the value that DR in the cloud brings when compared to traditional DR, it's very exciting because these possibilities weren't a reality before the cloud, which wasn't very long ago at all. My goal for today is to make sure I impart some useful information to you all, to make sure we help answer questions around just what problems DR in the cloud can solve for you, and really look forward to it.
Justin, thanks. So Garrett, Justin, thanks for being on our panel today and discussing this topic, and excited to kind of walk through some kind of in-depth questions around this. So just really quickly, I don't believe Amazon or AWS needs introductions as being the market leader in enterprise cloud concerning, breadth of service, availability, and just their dominance in the space. But who's AllCloud? Just a quick introduction of AllCloud. AllCloud was founded 13 years ago as a born-in-the-cloud system integrator, consultancy, and managed service provider. We have two predominant businesses that are and business units inside AllCloud. One is our AWS focused business. We are a premier consulting partner, 5 competencies, many specializations, and from project number 1 13 years ago has been with AWS, as all the projects we do today have been with AWS and in the enterprise cloud. The other part of our business is our platinum relationship with Salesforce that we are implementing and doing many, very, business-based implementations and focused in on our Salesforce, clients and the market. We're very proud of the number of customers and deployments we have, and very, something that's near and dear to our heart as it is to Amazon is, customer obsession and measuring a very high industry-based NPS score and what we do for our customers. So excited that you were able to join us and listen to us today as we go through this, what we believe is a very important topic. So with that, what I want to kick off today's session with is kind of more of a strategic and more broader topic that I'd like Garrett to talk to us about. So Garrett, with his experience and breadth of knowledge, I'd like you to jump in and talk a little bit about, the state of the industry, how people on the phone today should think about DR, where it's going, and why DR in the enterprise cloud.
Perfect. Happy to do it. So as you'll see on the screen here today on this slide, I think something really important to point out here is that the DR market, it's continuing to grow at such a quick pace, and it's actually expected to grow, up to $21 billion by 2023. But here's the thing, DR isn't a new concept in the world of technology. It's actually something that everyone has in place one way or another as part of that comprehensive continuity strategy, along with backup and long-term retention. Everyone's scenarios and definitions may vary, but luckily the team here at AWS, especially the team at AllCloud, we're all well-versed on your options that can really help craft a DR and continuity strategy that best fits your organization. So really getting into it here, why use cloud for disaster recovery? So I think the conversation is more so distinguishing between both traditional disaster recovery and cloud-based disaster recovery. So we'll be having an ongoing open discussion around cloud-based DR and when you should use it. But starting with traditional DR, as you can see here in the few bullet points, there's a lot more planning and investment when it comes to owning and operating your own hardware, running a data center. You really have to account for a lot of overhead expenses like power, cooling, equipment, upkeep, staff, and even future planning by trying to predict growth. Testing can also get a little complicated and require those late nights and weekends from your staff to really ensure that there's no disruption either. It'll also require a significant amount of investments in hiring or training actual DR experts. But I'll tell you, it doesn't have to be that way anymore. As more and more organizations are turning to the cloud to provide more flexible and cost-effective solutions, really allowing them to pay for what they use when they use it. And on top of that, AWS provides so many different services to allow you to truly innovate and become a builder. So cloud-based DR follows that same mantra as the cloud does. Pay for what you use when you use it. You don't have to invest in hardware or even guesstimate future growth and needs. You'll have that flexibility to utilize on-demand, right-size compute and storage and have the infrastructure maintained by AWS. So there's really no need to worry about all the usual overhead of power, cooling, equipment, and so on. So when it also comes to testing, it's easy. It's automated, repeatable. Most importantly, it's non-disruptive. And to add on top of that, you can also deliver sub-second RPOs or recovery point objectives and RTOs, recovery time objectives of minutes. But this eliminates the need to really ask your team to work those late nights and weekends on routine testing, which I'm sure everyone would agree is a bit of a relief here. So on to the next slide. Now that we understand the differences between traditional DR and cloud DR, let's really hone in on the benefits of cloud indoor DR in AWS. And again, at AWS, I'm a cloud indoor DR specialist here. And cloud, if you're not too familiar with it, cloud indoor disaster recovery is an agent-based DR solution that operates at the OS level, utilizing continuous block level replication, which provides a great deal of flexibility and availability. So it offers users the ability to protect both physical and virtual machines, as well as having capabilities of being any source into AWS. And what I mean by that is you can be on-prem, failing over into AWS, or if you're already all in AWS, you can go region to region or AZ to AZ, as well as cloud to cloud. So this is an ideal solution that will grow with your organization as your strategies evolve over time. It'll also support a wide range of OSs, databases, and applications. And a good rule here is essentially if it's Windows or Linux based and supported in AWS, you should be good to go. It's also very easy to use. It provides a great deal of automation to do that heavy lifting for you in the event of an outage. And Cloud Indoor was built for the enterprise, and as well as built for scale, and offers you those sub-second RPOs and RTOs of minutes that I mentioned earlier. And lastly, when it comes to security, Cloud Indoor Disaster Recovery will encrypt and compress your data both at rest and in flight, as well as operating at that OS level, as I mentioned before. Really adds an added layer of security there, utilizing connectivity provided by you from source to target, which will provide that extra layer of security there. So with that, I will pass things on.
Great, thanks, Garrett. So yeah, that's a great introduction, talking more strategically and kind of where the market's going and actually where Cloud Indoor specifically fits, right? But let's kind of dive into the weeds, right? So let me talk a little bit about the format we're going to hold today. We're going to discuss three major themes today, and then under those themes, we're going to have specific questions that we'll direct toward either Garrett or Justin. We'll have a very interactive discussion through these major themes, and then ultimately we'll kind of wrap things up with questions. So, but before we jump in, let's do a poll. Let's start with a poll and see where people are at. So you can see the question here again. Answer as you see fit. Where are you in your disaster recovery processes and plans in your organizational roadmap? You don't need to answer that, necessarily if you're not comfortable from a whole organizational perspective, but maybe you're aligned with a specific workload or part of the business. Let's answer that question and kind of see where some of the attendees are landing and see the results. All right. Again, please answer if you can, and if you are not comfortable, no problem. Let's just see if we can get a gauge of kind of where we're at. Give it a few more minutes. So Garrett, where do you think this is going to land? Where do you think, which area do you think is going to win?
I think everybody has all these existing active DR projects that they need our help with.
That or they've got it all figured out. One or the other, right?
Of course.
All right. So you can see they're in the, right now, the winner here, right, is in the active phase of an existing DR project, and I guess secondarily, just really kind of getting started, right? Not quite there yet. So thanks so much for doing that and participating in that poll. Kind of sets the tone a little bit, both with, Garrett's discussion of kind of the state of the industry and kind of where people are at in their journey, if you will. Let's kind of dive into the first question and the first theme, right? So our first theme that we're going to talk about really is at more of a higher level, why DR in the cloud and how you think about DR in the cloud. So ultimately what we find is this is a hot topic, kind of as I mentioned earlier, right? As corporations are looking at their business continuity plans, planning for DR, there's lots of debate, and in many ways, it's a misunderstood topic, right? It is actually, we hear a lot that, kind of like today, we're in the plans and we're figuring out, and or it's the enterprise cloud. There's all these great services. They have amazing SLAs. Doesn't this stuff just isn't it just fault tolerant and backed up already? So it is a bit of a misconceived topic, and we have some misconceptions that we run into quite a bit. So Justin, let me direct the first question to you, kind of based on that, right? So what are some of these common misconceptions that you see kind of regularly as you're working with customers, working with AWS regularly? What are you running into?
Yeah, so the most common misconception I would say is that DR is built into the cloud. So let me explain a little bit. Customers hear the word enterprise cloud. They understand that the infrastructure is fault tolerant, highly available, redundant, all these excellent things. All these things are true. And so you have something called availability zones, for example, in AWS. And these add a great amount of fault tolerance and redundancy to your solutions. The misconception there is that these fault tolerant solutions provide redundancy at the regional level, which is not the case. So to be clear, fault tolerance, redundancy, and high availability do not provide protection at the regional level. To explain that a little bit, what I'm saying is if there's an issue that affects an entire region, you need DR to protect against that. And this misconception can be very expensive. There are examples of it that have happened. I won't name names, but a video streaming service that some of us have used before. They have a lot of very talented people, a lot of smart people, brilliant engineering, wonderful products that we all love. However, at the time, they were hosting the solution in the cloud, and they still are. However, it was only hosted within a single region. And so there was a regional network issue. And because of this, their entire service became unavailable until that issue was resolved. So you might think to yourself, it needs to be something very dramatic that's going to take my solution down, like all of my servers going down, or a major ISP incident. But it can be also very small things that are upstream that have a very large downstream effect. And so you just can't predict what's going to happen. In the world of technology, things fail. So that's why if you need to protect yourself against regional issues, you need to have a DR solution in place.
Great. Thanks, Justin. So Garrett, let me direct this next one to you, right? So on the same vein, right? So I think we run into this a lot. There's some misconceptions around terminology a little bit. So can you explain the difference between kind of cloud snapshots, backup, and true cloud DR?
Absolutely, and it's definitely a common misconception. So it really all boils down to the RTOs, or recovery time objectives. So cloud-based snapshots, backup, and DR, they can actually all coexist and really make up a sound continuity strategy. But I think it's really important to understand, what role each plays and what they're truly designed for. So while backup focuses more on your day-to-day, quick file level recovery, DR is truly focused on application resiliency. So having a true cloud-based DR solution in place, utilizing, let's say, Cloud Indoor, enables customers to fail over and provide an RTO of minutes versus using backups or snapshots for the same exact purpose. Because if you do try to utilize it that way, it's going to require a little more work. You're going to have to rehydrate that data. Typically what we see rehydrating from AWS S3 into AWS EBS, and then manually building out those servers that you're looking to spin up. So as you can imagine, that truly impacts that RTO. You're looking more at hours and potentially days, depending on how big these workloads are. And it's just simply DR, using backup and things like that for DR and resiliency. It's just not what it was built for, which is fine. So CloudVR goes directly into EBS, provides that automation to spin up in minutes, and is very complementary to a solid backup strategy as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, really, the summary there is that there's a place for everything, right? But you got to make sure that all the components are considered and architected properly and put into place, right? To have a true DR strategy that it's going to map to a business continuity plan. So, Justin, Garrett, thanks for that. So let me pivot to the next question, kind of under this theme, right? So, since the onset and the wide adoption and growth of hyperscale enterprise cloud, along with that came new design patterns, right? New design best practices, things like microservices, containers, containerizations, platform as a service, right? These are all new design considerations that are being implemented inside any one given workload or modernized workload, etc. So I'll direct this question to both of you, but Justin, let's go with you first. What challenges do you see concerning specifically CloudVR and some of these new enterprise designs and best practices?
Well, the biggest challenge I would say is the shift of mindset that's generally required to take advantage of these new architectures. So as an example, let's say DevOps. So you hear DevOps, you hear that word thrown around a lot, but what does it really mean? Well, it means taking your traditional development teams and merging them with your operational teams. And so what that amounts to is the same folks who develop an application also support it. So this requires a change in mindset. It's not easy for all organizations to make this change, but it results in numerous benefits. So benefits such as CI/CD, automation, embracing a DevOps philosophy, for example, can bring advantages on these fronts. And so where does that add to on the DR front? Well, with the possibilities of CloudVR, we can now automate much of what used to have to be done manually. And so we can integrate a lot of these new philosophies into our VR solution and reduce things like RTOs and RTOs to levels that just weren't possible before. And we can reduce risks through automation. So these new architectural patterns, these new philosophies, they're not easy to take advantage of. They require specialized skill sets, a change in mindset, but they also bring possibilities that just weren't a reality not very long ago at all.
Okay, thanks, Justin. So, Gil, let's pivot to you. Kind of same question, right? So, what challenges do you think that might be seen, and how are those overcome with these kind of the evolution of these new architectural designs?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to echo everything Justin said, and really to add on to that, it really does come down to expertise. A lot of time I work with hundreds of customers here at AWS around their DR strategies. And honestly, the most successful ones that we find are the ones that engage with a true partner in their, not only their resilience strategy, but their cloud journey to really give them the knowledge and expertise, because really it's about environmental readiness, depending on where you are in your journey. And, are these machines cloud ready? Do we know what that means? Have we ran any discovery tools and had a professional, look at this with us and ensure that it's going to work the way it should when we get there? Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of factors that go in, and really, I think having a partner in this journey is going to be very effective.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. So then let's pivot. Let's take another poll question, right? I want to get some additional feedback from the panelists here. So number 2 polling question, right? How confident are you in your current DR strategy, right? Let's put this up and see what kind of responses we get. Of course, please if you're comfortable, please respond. If not, no big deal. Just want to get a feel of kind of where some of the attendees feel they are on their kind of DR journey and where they stand today. So we'll just give that a couple minutes.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I'm interested to see where this goes.
Yeah. the proverbial look in the mirror. Where do you really think you stand, right? Or how comfortable are you?
Right. Safe place. So, feel free. We'll be anonymous. We'll tell
Yeah.
That's right.
If someone pulled the plug, how quickly could we recover, right?
Exactly.
All right. Anticipation. All right, let's see. So we've got 38% is the largest and feel they're okay about it. Some not so confident at all, and some very confident. So feeling pretty good, and hopefully we're able to, basically support what you're working on today, kind of through the content we're covering. So let's go ahead and pivot to the next topic here and theme. So the next theme we want to go into is how do we feel and what do we believe are the most important elements of DR? So I'll kind of pivot into our first question under this kind of theme, right? So we see that organizations need to look at their DR strategy much like they look at anything they architect in the enterprise cloud, right? They don't want to over-architect, they don't want to under-architect, right? So Justin, let me direct the first question to you, right? With that in mind, what do companies need to consider when implementing their DR design? What are those components that you think they need to focus on first as a priority?
Yes, well, I think it all starts with the requirements from the business. So the technology experts within the organization need to work with the business to understand two key requirements. The first is RTO and the second is RPO, as Garrett touched on. So RTO is your recovery time objective, which is what is the maximum amount of time that it can take to recover our solution. So if we have an RTO of 12 hours, that means that we can take at most 12 hours to recover the solution. The next very important input is the RPO, which is the recovery point objective. And what that means is how much data loss can we really tolerate in terms of time. So let's say we have a recovery point objective of 6 hours. What that means is the business has said that it's acceptable to have up to 6 hours of loss, and so of data loss. And so these two numbers, 12 hours, 6 hours, these kinds of numbers in the hours were very common in traditional DR solutions. And just because the business came up with these numbers, it doesn't mean that that's what they wanted, right? So if it were possible to get these numbers in the minutes, they would love that. And so that's one of the things that's very exciting about CloudVR and Cloud Endure in particular, is just how low we can get these numbers. It just wasn't possible very long ago at all. Another key thing to consider when implementing DR and CloudVR as well are the network requirements. So with traditional DR, the network requirements would have been higher depending on the solution because you need to replicate all of your changes to your DR site. With Cloud Endure and Cloud as well, you can do this in a much more efficient manner where we're replicating the changes in near real time, which means that we can do so with less throughput. So Cloud Endure can do this in a very efficient manner, but that is still a very important consideration, is what are the network requirements to go from the primary site to the DR site. Another key consideration would be dependencies. And so when I say that, it's pretty vague, but I mean multiple things. So let's say application dependencies or server dependencies. We need to carefully consider what order we need to bring things up in the DR site. So which servers depend on which other servers, for example, and which applications depend on which other applications, for example. And the last thing that I'm going to mention is probably the most important thing, so I probably should have said it first, but I would say testing is also a very important consideration to make, is to make sure that we have a testing strategy in place. It's often neglected, especially in traditional DR environments, because it tends to be a very time-intensive proposition. It can also be expensive to really fully test DR in traditional environments. Sometimes you need to actually take your primary application down to do so. So, the technology team was often discouraged from doing so. They would often want to test, but the business would say, no, we can't, let's just do it some other time. And that other time, just didn't arrive.
Justin, thank you. So, Garrett, Justin covered some of the main areas you've got to consider when you're doing your planning, right? You're doing your design. Maybe you can elaborate on that if there's any additional ones you want to add to that list. And then also, really the question would be, what are the ones you should prioritize, right? Most importantly.
Yeah. Honestly, Justin laid out some exceptional points here, and you really nailed it on the head that it's not really different than any other well-architected design here. So I think priority number one, and I'll just double down what Justin said with that it's just very important to understand what needs to be protected. And that's just not enough. You really need to understand not only what's being protected, but what those RTOs are. That's what it really boils down to, is the recovery time objective. And from there, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just DR at play here. You have backup, you have long-term retention options in the cloud as well. There's a lot of things at play that can really form a well-architected continuity strategy. So it really just starts with those simple, basic building blocks of just understanding how much time your organization can afford to be down, and what those critical machines are. And from there, you can really then embark on your cloud journey a little smoother, understanding what's what, maybe use some discovery or analysis tools to truly get a deep dive of what that data looks like. And from there, you can really highlight different tiers of requirements for your environment. DR is your mission critical machines you can't afford to part with here. And then back up for more of your relaxed day-to-day, file recovery, and it's all a big part of the plan.
Yeah. I mean, the themes I'm hearing are get with the business, right? Really understand your workload and the dependencies, right? Start there, right? And then think differently about RTO and RPO, right? You can provide at fairly inexpensive cost, way more inexpensive than traditionally thought of, higher levels of RTO and RPO for your end customer in the business, right? Don't be afraid to kind of push the envelope a little bit and, stretch the bounds of the architecture, right? You have more capabilities in front of you now. So those are a couple of themes that I hear kind of, jumping out from what I'm hearing. So then, Justin, here's another question for you, right? With that, right, we've talked a little bit about traditional DR thinking and how you need to evolve that, right? Well, when we're working with clients, what are you seeing as the top items that are taking these, extending these RTO, RPO numbers, right? Or why is it taking long to recover, with some of these, approaches?
Well, I think the best way to answer that is to compare cloud DR with traditional DR. So in many cases, traditional DR, a lot of the work that goes into doing a failover test or an actual failover, a lot of that is very manual. So you need to have staff on hand that are familiar with the process and available to execute this process. Whereas in cloud DR, we can leverage services such as CloudFormation to automate much of this, and CloudEndure also automates much of this. Another issue I would say that would cause the recovery to take longer is a lack of testing. It keeps coming up over and over again, but it's a major contributor. So if you think of a traditional DR solution, a lot of times IT is discouraged from actually doing DR tests. So when it's time to do an actual failover, it could very well be the first time that they've done this. And so that could definitely extend how long it's going to take to do this recovery, which is much easier in the cloud because testing can be done on demand without affecting your production environment. So really, it's much easier for IT teams to test these DR solutions. Another issue is this is more about the performance of DR itself. Traditional DR essentially requires a duplicate environment of your entire production infrastructure or that production workload. And so, not every organization out there can afford that or wants to spend that kind of money on DR. And so they might have a solution that can't perform as quickly as production, but can still, operate. Whether or not it's operating tolerably is another question, but that could result in reduced revenue as well. The other thing that I'll mention regarding traditional DR solutions is that there are fast solutions out there. Again, I won't name names, but there's a database vendor that I worked with, for example. They have a DR solution that can perform fast failovers, except it's very expensive. So with CloudEndure, you get the benefits of being able to automate a lot of your failovers, to test without risking production, and you can do so in a very fast manner that's also inexpensive.
Great. So then, kind of the last question in this theme that we're discussing is really in line with kind of hybrid, right? So Garrett, let me direct this question to you. So as customers and or attendees on the call today, if they see a need for hybrid solutions, how does AWS and CloudDoor kind of address that need?
Easily. Yeah, so if you remember earlier, I mentioned Cloud endures any source into AWS. And as we know, many customers are on their cloud journey and there are different phases of that cloud journey. So as they continue to evolve, they really need a solution that can evolve with them. And again, just to rehash here, when I said any source, early stage customers can be on-prem and utilize AWS as that DR target. And it can also act as a mechanism for migration too, because down the road, if they ever wanted to move that same workload fully into the cloud, it's a matter of just failing it over and repointing. For those folks that are well on their way in the journey or all in AWS, we provide region to region or AZ to AZ options as well. Even cross-cloud for those who might have a hybrid cloud strategy. They can use AWS as a DR target in many different scenarios. We also find that those early stage customers, and we have a lot of them really making that move, that using disaster recovery is such an easy entryway into the cloud because it's familiar. And using CloudEndure helps them get a little more familiar, protect their workloads in AWS, but it can also be a training ground for them in understanding what else the cloud has to offer. So, we see that quite a bit in a hybrid scenario, and I think CloudEndure can certainly have a place to help ease people into it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Garrett. And then to just one last question in this topic, as customers, as people are, putting together their strategy and architecture, what are a few things that they should think about, especially if their use case is hybrid?
Well, I think they should not think in terms of traditional DR. So with CloudVR, there's a whole new world of possibilities that are open to you. So if a customer starts thinking about CloudVR, they don't need to necessarily think to themselves that I need to replicate my entire infrastructure in the cloud. There are solutions that they can look into that just weren't possible with traditional DR. So one of those solutions is called Pilot Light. And this is a very interesting architectural design in which we create you could say a skeleton or a minimal infrastructure in the cloud. And only when we need to actually fail over or do a test do we provision the rest of the infrastructure. So this brings numerous benefits. For one, it's much more cost effective. We're no longer having to pay for an entire set of duplicate infrastructure in the cloud. Generally, with something like Pilot Light, you only really need to replicate your data changes. So for example, if you have a key database, and you could also maintain an application server that is a small EC2 instance, just to verify that the application works. And then on top of that, you can layer on automation, which CloudVR can do for you, and automate much of the testing and failover should you ever need to do that. Yeah. So my summary there would just be, try not to think in terms of traditional DR when you're looking at cloud solutions.
Okay, great. So with hybrid, I think there's going to be multiple use cases, right? Workloads, some workloads will require it, some won't, right? But you've got to take that in consideration. There might be compliances that require it. There might be a lot of reasons that would drive it. So thanks both of you kind of talking through the options there. So let's pivot into our last major topic, which is, as we did our original polling question, kind of where you are in your strategy. We had some kind of in the middle of planning, others in the middle of implementing, some just starting to think about it. This next kind of theme is really, where do you get started, right? So we've talked quite a bit, talked about a lot of topics already. So let's talk about how you get started, right? What are the components to either get started or refine or progress your DR strategy, right? So Justin, this question's kind of back to you. What is the single most important item to consider when getting started? What's that single item?
Well, I would say, again, do not think in terms of traditional DR. When it comes to CloudVR, this can be evaluated and tested at zero risk. So that probably sounds, how could that be true, zero risk? Well, we can provision an environment in the cloud, use CloudVR, and test that DR solution without impacting production. And there are no licensing commitments, no hardware commitments of any kind. If it works and you're happy with it, you can stay with it. If not, you don't have to use it. And this just was not possible with traditional DR, because by the time you realize that it's not working the way you want it to, you've already purchased essentially all of that infrastructure and you're stuck with it. The other thing I'll add is you should leverage a partner. Leverage the expertise of someone who's been through this process many times and can get you there easily and successfully.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Justin. So then, Garrett, kind of last major question here, still in the theme of kind of where do you get started. I know that collectively, as we're working with collective customers together, both AWS and AllCloud, we see common models, that we run into, and there's 4 that I can think of. So can you kind of dive into those common models that we run into typically?
Absolutely. I think 4 of the common models that you see are maybe installing and really that set it and forget it type of model, let it do its job. The second one, install that and really just establish an ongoing cadence around periodic testing, whatever that may look like, whatever the business requires. Or, you can just manage your own infrastructure on that end, or even lean on an MSP. But I think all these boil down is just really the value behind having a strategic partner involved.
Yeah. So kind of the 4 are kind of install and leave, install, come back and periodically test, manage your own basic infrastructure, or lean on an MSP, either like an AllCloud or your MSP of choice kind of thing, right? Those kind of 4 models. Yeah. Great. Well, first of all, let me, thank you guys for being panelists, kind of going in way more deeper on some of these topics that we see quite a bit. But, I guess what I'd like to also, discuss is, as, much to what Justin, spoke to just a minute ago, right? So both the combination of working with hundreds and hundreds of customers on the Amazon side and both on the AllCloud side, leaning on a partner is important, right? But ultimately, I hope that today, at least some of the topics that we talked to and considered, right, helped you either get started, evolve what you're doing today and think a little differently, and maybe even adjust your plans moving forward. But AllCloud is obviously always here, to help as you're going down this journey, trying to understand, what are the best directions, what's the best strategies, how do you think a little differently and push the envelope on, increasing those RTOs or decreasing RTO and RPOs for your customers and customers in your use cases, right? So, with that, Justin or Garrett, anything else you kind of want to add before we kind of move into either conclusions and questions.
I'm all good on my end.
All good on my end, and definitely excited to see how we can all help some of these customers here with some of their DR and continuity strategy needs.
Yeah, well, great. So just to kind of, then wrap up here just with a couple other comments as we, end the discussion, and then we'll take final few questions here as we're, coming toward the end of the hour, is first, as you're looking at your DR plan, as you're looking at partners to help and or you're looking at evolving your DR strategy, there's a couple things to potentially think about that AllCloud and AWS can provide. One, AllCloud has developed what we call kind of the rapid disaster recovery evaluation process that we can come in very quickly, help you look at a workload, walk it through this 4-step methodology very rapidly, get a POC up and running, and you have a item to click at the top and at the very top on Learn More that if you are interested in both AllCloud and or AWS helping you, feel free to reach out to us and use that link. Secondarily, I'm hoping minimum there's some takeaways you have that you can take away from this session today and implement it tomorrow and how you're making your business continuity plans more solid and you're integrating your DR strategies into those business continuity plans. And then last but not least, one other area I'd like to kind of offer today is recently, as of a couple of weeks ago, Amazon came to us and AWS came to us and said, that there's an offer that they'd also like to put out to the market, and it would be a very good combination with our evaluation offering, which is a 90-day free license approach for the DR services if you take on a certain amount of workload. So, the combination of both the the recovery eval assessment and the 90-day free services and DR for Cloud and Door, I think is a strong combination to really get you jump started and implementing best practices and implementing some of the stuff that we talked about today. So, kind of with that, let me take just a couple questions that came in, and I'll direct the first one to Garrett here. So the first question that came in is, what approach or what is the best method for determining your RTO and RPO guidelines? Right now, I know this is a big topic, right? But what are a couple things, Garrett, that you might be able to guide the attendees today on concerning this? Great question.
Yeah, I mean, I think focusing on working backwards within your assessment of your environment. I think it really is a team effort in working with your team to understand what those mission critical machines are. So when you're trying to figure out what your RTO is, highlight those mission critical machines and understand how valuable they are to the business. A lot of times there's a lot of databases that from the CFO side of the office really depends on to keep the cash flow going. Those are something that might need a lower, maybe even hour or two RTO. So, I mean, it's really understanding your business, and it really is a joint effort. It's not just an IT discussion. This is something you're talking to from, your leadership and understanding, what's important to the business, not just IT, because everything goes hand in hand.
Yeah. I mean, back to what we were discussing earlier, right? Enterprise Cloud DR provides a whole different level of capabilities and a different way of thinking. To take that back to the business, take that back to the use case, right, at the use case level, and you are able to push the envelope and maybe provide a different level of service that you were ever able or capable of doing before. So, thanks, Garrett. And just quick reminder, please use the chat if you have any additional questions. Would love to hear, and then obviously you can click and reach out to us if you're either interested in the 90-day free trial and or our DR evaluation package. The last question, and then we'll wrap up, is I'll direct this one to you then, Justin. What is the one item I need to make sure I consider, kind of the single item, most important item, I guess, consider so I don't over-architect my DR architecture? Well,
when traditional DR architecture, I think, can be a little intimidating. They tend to be large projects that are very expensive. And so what I would say is with CloudVR, think creatively, think differently, and remember, this is not traditional VR. So it should be a much less stressful, expensive endeavor. So you can think to yourself, well, I don't need to purchase a completely separate set of infrastructure. I could look at something like a pilot light. I can get my feet wet with some of my critical systems, just make sure that it works, and test it, of course. So we don't need to go out and purchase VR for everything all at once. And when we also keep in mind that the risk is much lower, I think that will increase our odds of success and make the whole thing less intimidating, less difficult, and less expensive.
Yeah, great, great. All right, well, we're starting to come to the top of the hour. First of all, again, for the attendees, thanks for attending wherever you are in the world. Appreciate you listening in on a topic that we are interacting with, and it's very important to us to make sure that the workloads that you are implementing in the cloud are fault tolerant. They have a strong disaster recovery plan behind them. So I appreciate your attendance, appreciate the time with the panelists. Thanks so much. If you are interested either in the 90-day free trial, you can reach out to your AWS rep. You can also contact us through the link that we provided. And then also would happy to talk to you about our DR assessment to help you kind of jumpstart your DR plan. So again, thanks so much. The link's at the top. Again, thanks so much for all of your time today, both panelists and attendees, and we'll talk to everyone soon. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye now.
Bye, everyone.
Take care, everybody.